The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us in part 5 of the Brick by Brick session. This PowerPoint will be about professionalism, ethics, business, and law. Joining me today is Nancy Porambo. I am Donna Sarvello, the VP of Educational Support for NCB. I've been in the massage therapy profession for over 20 years. And thank you, Nancy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Donna. Thanks for having me. I'm Nancy Porambo, and I live in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. I'm the president of the Therapy Option, and I'm starting my 30th year of practice this year. I'm an NCB approved provider, and I'm an expert witness. I have two facets to my business. One is a part of a clinic that it focuses on neuromuscular therapy, and the other is located in the spa. It's a spa in the historic area of Jim Thorpe. I'm a national past president of AMTA. I currently serve as advisor for the American Medical Association's Healthcare Professional Advisory Committee, and I currently am seated on the Pennsylvania Massage Therapy Licensing Board.
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of your clinic, and it is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Nancy, can you tell us a little bit about the benefits of being board certified?
Certainly. Well, years ago, it was my personal goal to achieve the highest credentials within the profession. The standards were set, that NCB sets are very high. And, back 30 years ago when I started, there was only NCB. There were really no licensing laws, at least not in my state. And the profession was really just starting to grow. So NCB set those standards, and I think that it gives us the opportunity to elevate the profession. I think it helps to demonstrate competency for the members, and I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Perfect. And we all know that NCBTMB was created by an arm of the AMTA. So I would say that those boards work together to create everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, Nancy, tell us, what is professionalism to you?
Well, Donna, let me say that whenever I'm teaching an ethics class, and I always ask this question, the hands go up right away and students start naming variables that define professionalism. So for instance, draping appropriately, maintaining confidentiality, documentation is really big, following state and federal tax laws, refraining from discrimination, sexualizing relationships, even refusing gifts. All of those things are correct. But basically, the core elements of professional conduct is carved out of principles, for instance, of morals and ethics and business planning and even risk management. Profession, I think, is risk-filled, from the start. It's based on hands-on manipulation of soft tissues while we're alone with the client in a closed environment. So professional conduct extends far beyond the privacy of the massage room. I think it begins with characteristics such as therapist education, transparency, fairness, and I think most of all, respect. The characteristics are necessary, help us build a successful professional career, and at the same time, I think safeguards against the risks that's undertaken by performing massage. Professionalism is the right and wrong of how a business should operate, and at one time it wasn't always a priority. NCB did recognize, I think, the need to define how to operate a professional and ethical establishment, and this was necessary to help to dispel the public's perception that was associated with massage parlors. Now, this trend actually helped to promote massage therapy, and I think today we're viewed as a viable entity for health and wellness.
All great points. So tell us about professionalism in different areas like the waiting room, treatment room, what professional boundaries are.
Sure. The waiting area, it's the first introduction into your office. Obviously, you'll get a call from a client and, you'll schedule them to come in. We always send a case history and an office policy to the client in advance. So many times we get people in for first time, and especially some of our elderly clients, they're not sure what to expect. So we like to give them a little introduction, send some things out in advance. And when they come into the office, The items and materials in the waiting room should reflect personal character of the therapist. The treatment room, on the other hand, I think is the very best way to educate. I mean, not only through our hands-on and what we do with our hands, obviously, to make a person better, but my room has wall charts with trigger points, and I use these often to educate. So I believe that if I spend the right amount of time educating my clients, I'm almost guaranteed to have referrals from that client. Why? Well, because they know what I do. I also believe in clean. My clients want to feel safe in my office. So those are important variables that I think we have to, we have to be aware of. The public, when we're talking about communication with the public, I think we need to seize every opportunity to present our services to the public. When I first began my practice 30 years ago, business card exchanges were common, and we had them every several months, and we had them at different business locations. And I went to almost every one of them. I wanted people to know what it is I did. I had to educate, educate, educate. And health fairs, making sure we showed up at health fairs, we distributed pamphlets, brochures. So, seize that opportunity. I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because I used to stand in the grocery store aisle with a glass or a bottle of water in my hand and look for people that were stretching or had backaches, and I would hand them my business card. So that's perfect.
Yes, it's perfect. You are correct. There's always someone that has something going on, that's for sure. So, continuing on to your slides here, Donna, professional boundaries, boundaries provide us, provide safety. When a boundary is crossed, there's usually a sense of discomfort, and it's one of the hardest things for a person to do is to address a difficult issue. I think this is why it's so important to have an office policy that sets the stage for business. It gives us something to fall back on, like, that's my policy, that's why we do this. Business structure, it's extremely necessary in order to conduct the business appropriately. Otherwise, we're going to have boundaries that are always crossed. And those boundaries, when they are crossed, they actually cause hard feelings and resentment. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Be aware that there's many different types of boundaries that we need to establish with our clients. So I think that the relationship should start with learning to have a clear vision, be direct and address problems when they occur. Now, standards of care, I think everyone needs to be treated the same. That's a very, very important that we should, what we do for one, we should do for the other. So having that standard protocol set in our office is very important. Working in healthcare facilities, well, this can be challenging for some because, you have to be aware of the protocols and the policies that are in place there. You have to learn to talk their language. So that takes some getting used to. And it's a very rewarding career for many that do work in the medical community and in hospitals. So those are important things that we need to be aware of.
Excellent. Okay, tell us a little bit about NCB's Code of Ethics.
Well, I really like NCB's Code of Ethics. I think they're concise, and I think they serve as a reminder for therapists. I'll give you an example of an interpretation within your code. It's the second code of the NCB's code. It states that a therapist needs to abide by all the laws governing massage in their state and to act only within their scope of practice. Well, if their scope of practice in their state indicates that they need to keep financial and treatment records, and they don't, well, then they can find themselves in a heap of trouble if they're informed that a problem was encountered after a session and the records need to be produced and turned over to a legal source. So essentially, Donna, massage therapists, are kinesthetic learners. They love to have examples of each so that they can anchor it into their memory. And there will be times when there are red flags that go up all over, and when the course of action really isn't clear. So I think this is the reason why, Donna, that in many state laws, CEs in ethics are required. And they help to serve as a reminder and to help keep things in check.
Yes, they do. So tell us about clinic management.
Well, clinic management, it depends on how the office is set up. I mean, there are a lot of things we can talk about, but I'll focus on this particular slide with respect to if the therapist is an independent contractor or if they're an employee. This would determine what your staffing expenses are. For instance, if the therapist is an employee, be aware that you're responsible for workman's compensation. Social Security taxes and other matching taxes, and in many cases, healthcare benefits. So they would require a W-2 at the end of the year. Now, if you have independent contractors working in your office, obviously they'll make a larger amount per session, and that's primarily because they're responsible for paying their own self-employment taxes. They would be given a 1099 at the end of the year. So those are some important things to consider, if we're going to be having therapists. And I will guarantee you, as your therapy practice grows, you will need help. So those are two things that I think are important, whether a therapist is an independent contractor or an employee. Now, dual relationships is the second bullet on your slide, and I'll talk a little bit about that. That it means when there's a dual relationship, it's when a client and the therapist have another relationship. For instance, a therapist is also a personal friend, but is a client. A therapist also uses the services of their attorney, but the attorney is a client. So personal boundaries, I think, are very important, and they need to be respected. For instance, if the therapist hours are Monday through Friday and weekends they're closed, well, if a friend or a relative has a relative that's coming home on the weekend and asks the therapist to take their relative on the weekend because they've got a lot of back pain, this can present a problem. Provisions have to be made for friends and relatives that differ from the office policy changes, and it does change the nature of the relationship sometimes. So in many cases, it can develop resentment, which we want to avoid. So in essence, with dual relationships, I think it takes two very mature and respectful individuals to have a dual relationship when you are in business. And third bullet is marketing. Marketing, there are many avenues to market today, and I can tell you I've tried them all over a 30-year period. I've tried everything from billboards, newspaper ads. I can tell you that we've even tried television. Over the past 30 years, we've done it all. So social media today, that's where it's at. It costs very little. It can reach a larger audience almost immediately. And the only responsibility you have is to make sure that they're updated and they need to be maintained. Keep your audience updated. Very, very important.
Do you still have a recording of your television version?
I probably do somewhere. It's kind of funny. But thanks for asking. I'm not sure I want to pull that one up.
That'll be the next webinar series.
Thank you, Donna.
Okay, let's talk about record keeping and its importance.
Oh, Donna, I've always said that when we put our hands on someone, we have a tremendous responsibility. So before any treatment can begin, I think the case history is one of the most important processes of the therapist-client interaction. Case history should include a paragraph on informed consent that has to be read and signed. And therapists have to be honest with themselves and evaluate whether they're really the right therapist for that client. I think an office policy, it may be foreign to some, but I found it to be extremely helpful with my clients. An office policy, it provides the clients with your policy on things like late or missed appointments, the cost, hours of operation, whether or not you accept insurance. And both of these can be sent to a client in advance of their session, making it so much easier for you to manage when that client really does come in. Now, payment and tips, all payments need to be recorded, as are the tips. Some therapists keep a ledger. I was really surprised 2 of my therapists do, of all the tips that they earned from every client. And this would serve as proof in the event that there ever was a dissatisfied client. Well, you gave a $20 tip, but here's what I have to tell you is that just because a client gives a tip, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were happy with the session. In many states, when I've talked to people, that they gave a tip because it was expected. So having something reasonable like a response card and adding that to the end of a session and asking them to complete it is, I think, much more effective in gaining the opinion of your client post-session. And you can keep those as part of your record keeping as well. Your taxes and your write-offs, I always say have a good accountant and pay your taxes. If you can record all of your revenue appropriately, then you learn what the legitimate write-offs are. It offsets the income earned. So I believe that, there are lots of good things that you can set for yourself. You can set yourself as an employee of your business, and you can have your pension paid, you can have your health insurance paid, so it's important to keep the recording of revenues and even tips so you can spend it appropriately for the business, and you can still draw a salary. So very important information. CE expenses, if the course you attended is required as part of your licensing requirements, then it's a legitimate expense. And obviously the cost, of things must be reasonable, and expenses are only to be written off for the time that the course was attended. So if you fly to, let's say, Las Vegas for a course and you come in 2 days earlier, those 2 earlier days may not be considered as a legitimate expense. The night before the course and the night after the course is completed would be a legitimate expense. Extending beyond that and having a week that you're spending in Vegas would not be part of that expense. So it's really important for therapists to learn, what they're entitled to take as legitimate expenses.
Excellent. That's excellent information. So what are some things to avoid?
Well, some of the things to avoid, I see all 3 bullets here, and all are extremely important. The third one being the most important that I've experienced here. I found that sometimes it's hard for a therapist to tell a client that they need to refer them out. It doesn't minimize who they are. It shows character of that therapist. It shows professionalism, and it shows that they care enough, to find the practitioner that can possibly bring the client the results they need. Now, boasting about education doesn't help anybody, you nor the client. If the results aren't there, I can guarantee you there will be disappointment. A referral comes from a physician. It's my belief that it's the responsibility of the therapist to follow the referral plan and then follow through after evaluating the client and send the referral source a report of your findings. What a missed opportunity that would be if you didn't have any type of communication back with the referring physician. So I think that it's very, very important that they know what you're doing in the therapy to make their client or their patient better. So that follow through is very important. That third bullet, I'm glad you put it in there, Donna. Thank you. A very, very important bullet.
Thank you for describing it. Okay, now let's talk about boundaries between the therapist and the client.
Well, boundaries, your transference and countertransference is extremely important. I think it's something that confuses your client-therapist relationship. I think that it's important that you recognize that it's happening so that it can be stopped immediately. I gave a good example of transference and countertransference in my article that's attached with this. If a therapeutic relationship isn't clear and the expectations are outside the scope of the massage therapist practice, like for instance, giving advice, it changes the nature of that relationship and it leaves the therapist vulnerable to problems. So, really important that we understand when it's happening, stop it when it's happening, and, those type of things, we fall into them because they're familiar. They're very familiar behaviors that remind us of behaviors that someone else interacts with us. So we have to make sure we stick to the protocol, stay professional, stay within our scope of practice. That's extremely important. Now, public interaction refers to how you conduct yourself in your community. And we do a lot of that. Positive might be helping with community events, volunteering. Negative now could be a problem for your practice because it could be, for instance, being visibly intoxicated at the town picnic. I think therapists need to remember that when you're in business, you're visible. You wear 2 hats, and sometimes it's not so easy to be separated. So your personal behaviors can be viewed negatively, and it can affect your business. So be aware of that. You're going to be wearing 2 hats whenever you are in business. You're very, very visible. And family and friends, we talk about that, about setting boundaries, because those boundaries can be stretched by family and friends by making exceptions. Now, social media is a big one. The things that you post on social media, they're enduring material. They last forever. So be aware that information, it can be searched and it can reflect poorly upon you if inappropriate things are posted. So be aware whenever you're posting that that can be there forever. Appointments. Well, appointments, this is all part of your office policy, and communicate effectively, communicate clearly to your clients, and set boundaries. And it will help you to support your work-life balance and we always know that that's challenged because of the physical nature of massage therapy.
You know, doing this webinar with you, especially you, I know you practice all of these. You don't just preach it, you actually do what you say. It's excellent information for our audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Okay, let's talk about inappropriate behavior.
Oh, inappropriate behavior. Gee, I like to circle back to the initial contact with the client, whether it be in person or by phone. Have you set the standards for care in your office? This is an important thing to set, the stage for treatment. My case evaluation with my client is done so professionally and with so many questions that I think at the end of that session, that it's pretty obvious that this will be a therapeutic massage. It doesn't leave any room for interpretation. Be aware of red flags and never, ever lose control of your session. If a client refuses to sit down for an interview or complete a case history, then there is no treatment. That's your office policy. And we had a new gal that was doing an internship for us one time, and she just found that client would not fill out that case history and kept on telling her that he's in a hurry, that he just wants to come for a massage. Well, this is a situation where you need to take control, and that's part of your office policy. Fill out those forms. They have to be filled out. The comments that are inappropriate, whether comments are made in the treatment room, I think if they're made in the treatment room, you tried redirecting the conversation, and if this continues, then you end the session. You have the ability to end a session if you're uncomfortable for any reason. If the inappropriates come from your friends, be very clear, correct the comment, and don't let it be unaddressed. It's really important. These are your friends, and hopefully you can talk with them.
Absolutely. Okay, and this leads us into misconduct. Tell us about misconduct in the treatment room.
Well, misconduct. Communication in the treatment room begins with informed consent and the case history form. They serve as foundation to guide our conversation and helps us to develop that treatment plan for the client. When we have misconduct of clients, it depends on the situation, but sexual assault needs to be reported to police. I've said it once, never lose control of your session. If you're uncomfortable for any reason, then you can end that session. Reporting misconduct of therapists, well, most state laws have a hotline to report a complaint, and these are typically confidential, so you can be assured of that. The state reviews the complaint, and if it's valid, then they'll forward it to the state board to act upon that complaint. So there is a place to go, and if there's something that you hear about that a therapist did, don't try to solve that on your own. You can report it, and you can do so confidentially. Now, refusing treatment, I would say recognize that there's circumstances in which you must refer a client to someone else. This protects you and it protects the client. So follow your instincts, be safe, refuse to treat. And I'll give you an example. I had an 82-year-old woman come into my office. She fell in her kitchen. She came to me with her ribs sticking out. And she begged me. She literally begged me to please work on this. You put some heat on it, do something, help me to make it feel better. Well, I sent her to the hospital, and yes, the rib was broken. So follow your instincts, and the answer is no. If you're feeling it inside, be safe. Refuse to treat.
Excellent information. Okay, and let's talk about liability now.
Well, as we know, the associations do provide us with our liability insurance, which is extremely important to have in today's world. If you have independent contractors, it's just a note that you've hired them to work in your office. It's necessary to add them as an additional insured, to have them add you as an additional insured. Now, lawsuit, this is a big one here. We can talk for a long time on that. It occurs when therapists might not think that things were that important. And they're really surprised to find out that they have to be accountable, to turn in their records for something that's occurred. And I'll give a couple of examples. For instance, not having a case history, okay, and sign-in sheet during a chair massage. And what if that client passes out during the therapy session and there's no information? A person could buy a gift certificate, just because they buy the gift certificate, it means that they need a case history. And they may not ever come back, or they may come back if they really like what you've done, but you absolutely need to give them a case history. And how about putting on a heat lamp and then walking away and leaving the client alone for 20 minutes? Doing exercises on a client that they learned in the gym. Okay, these are all things that can be very, very problematic. Just because it worked in the gym doesn't mean you bring it into your therapy session. Not recognizing on the case history that the client just had surgery a week ago and you ended up treating it anyway. Or you didn't ask questions about medications, even though they wrote a joking comment in the box that says too many to mention, and you treat them anyway. Well, there may be some contraindications there that we need to be aware of. So I find that, Donna, if a client is confident that the therapy is competent, they'll be so much more reassured during and even after that therapy session. So things happen. I think that's why it's important for us to cross our T's and dot our I's. The case history is an essential piece of information so a proper assessment can be made. It sets the direction. And without the proper allotment of time, I find this to be so problematic that therapists are only given 1 hour to finish their therapy session. It's a brand new client. You have no idea what the history is on this client. There are a few little questions that they're asking that may not even give the full view of what's going on in that person's health and their body at that time. So proper time needs to be allotted for each session. Completing the paperwork, making sure that you keep your notes and make sure that they're filed appropriately, and follow through. Give them a call after that first session. How you doing? You know, when those things, you kind of slip up on those and you're too busy, problems can occur. So essentially, in essence, Donna, I say a massage is not just a massage. There's a whole lot that goes into setting the stage for that session and then maintaining it in an order that a valuable therapist-client relationship can develop for many, many years ahead. So these are extremely important variables. I think therapists need to know that professionalism, you know, it starts when that first phone call is made, and following through with paperwork and making sure that you take your ethics classes, follow up, learn, ask questions, because there will always be red flags that present themselves. And, you know, God knows after being in practice this long, you know, whatever can go wrong may go wrong. And we need to be prepared for that. You know, we're very visible. Remember that as well. So, yeah, a massage is not just a massage.
You know, you mentioned in the beginning that you're an expert witness. I know you've had a lot of experience seeing cases that massage therapists, situations massage therapists may have taken for granted or not thought about, and had to speak on those.
Yeah, I have, Donna. And like I said, sometimes it's really surprising because the therapist doesn't realize that this was important. And they just thought that, well, this person's going to be here one time and I'll never see them again. So there are no notes, or there is no case history, or there is no follow through. I mean, they're missing wonderful opportunities to get to know who that person is and maybe make them a client for a long, long time, and have a relationship with them in that way. So I think that therapists need to be aware that they have a responsibility. It's not just the massage. It means more than that. We need to have all that paperwork, the time, and everything that goes with it to make sure that they're followed through. In our office here, our therapy sessions are 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I can assure you that that 20 minutes is well spent in education and, you know, going over that case history and basically talking as we're going through that session to educate them just a little more if I have that opportunity. We have a very successful practice here in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, and our spa runs very, very well in the historic district. And I say that that's because our therapists are very good. They follow through, they get the information, and you know, they cross those T's and dot those I's. It's very, very important. So it's a whole process, and they can have a very successful practice. And after 30 years, I'm very proud to say that, you know, I think we've accomplished that.
Excellent. You know, Nancy, I can't imagine doing this webinar with anybody else but you, because you do have a wealth of information.
Oh, thanks, Donna. I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Perfect. So for more information about board certification, you can visit our website or you can call our 1-800 number. If you want to email directly with a person, email info@ncbtmb.org. And if you need additional resources, please check out our study guide. You can click shop on the NCBTMB website. Nancy, thank you again for joining us. This was excellent. I'm sure everybody got a lot of information.
You're welcome, Donna. Thanks for having me.